Miami Marlins fans are on a collision course back down to earth after today's loss to the New York Mets. The Marlins lose the last two games of the series against the Mets and drop 2 out of 3 against their division rivals. And all of a sudden, the Marlins are staring at a 7-3 record, and back-to-back losses, and some of the holes in this team have been exposed over the past 2 nights. What's going on, guys? It's Ethan Budowsky here to recap the last 2 games of the Mets and Marlins series. We talked about Game 1 after the Marlins were on their winning streak, but their winning streak sadly came to an end on Saturday night, and the losing streak started with a loss this afternoon against the Mets in Game 3 of the series. It was a tough game for sure. The Marlins, you kind of saw some of the things that you were concerned about coming into the year with the Marlins. There was some bad umpiring, but nevertheless, the Marlins got beat the last 2 nights, and they need to rally again. Still, the Marlins sit in pretty good position. They're in first place in the National League, so all things considered, it's really not that terrible. We're complaining about being 7-3 after 10 games with a makeshift roster, and it seems like the sky is falling, but it's really not, and the Marlins have a chance to get back on track in this next week. So let's go into the games. Let's talk about Game 2 and 3 here as we go to the pad. Game 2, was an 8-4 loss to the Mets. Daniel Castano got the start. He was the other piece, the throw-in, you could say, in the Marcell Ozuna trade to the Cardinals. All 4 players that the Marlins acquired in that trade have now made their major league debuts. Obviously, Zach Gallen is now with the Diamondbacks. As a result, the Marlins have Jazz Chisholm in their system. We might see some of him this year, but nevertheless, it seems like the Marlins won that trade, especially considering now that Ozuna is in a different organization completely. He's with the Braves. But Castano made his way up. He had a good year last year, made his way up to the big leagues this year as a result of all this roster movement going on. He was okay. He wasn't great. He had a high strike percentage. He threw 50 of 76 pitches for strikes. He went 4 1/3, allowed 5 hits and 4 runs, all of those coming on 2 2-run homers, including Gator great Pete Alonso, who got on the board. It was his first home run in 10 games. So he just kind of got beat there. He had 4 strikeouts, though. It really wasn't terrible. He didn't let the game get away from him, but it certainly wasn't great. You can't be giving up 2 home runs, especially two runs, and the Marlins offense didn't really help him out that much. The bullpen kept it in check for a pretty good while. Forsythe got one back with a home run, and then they got one back to go up 5-2. And then it looked like the Marlins were going to scratch and claw their way back into the game when Monte Harrison delivered his first RBIs on his second hit of his career. He took a nice, he took a pitch and did a nice piece of hitting to drive it in between the shift through the right side of the infield. It was a really nice piece of hitting from Monte, and we'll talk about him later. There's plenty to talk about there. But it was a nice piece of hitting, and good to see him, not trying too hard, not trying to do too much, just kind of shooting a ball the other way, picking up a couple of RBIs. That was really good. That was maybe the one positive on the offensive side of the ball from Monte in this series. So after that, it was 5-4, and the Marlins looked like they were scrapping their way back into it. But again, the bullpen finally kind of blew up. And I talked about it in the video after the win on Friday night, that it was kind of coming because the bullpen has been so taxed that the Marlins needed a long start. They didn't really get one in either of these 2 games. We'll talk about Pablo's start in a minute. But, 4 1/3 is not really what you're looking for, and so the bullpen had to pitch the majority of the game, and it got to him. Brian Moran put 2 on, and then Josh A. Smith led up the 3-run home run that broke the game open, and that was all she wrote from there. The Mets went up 8-4, never looked back, and that was the final score. So they finally got to the bullpen. The Marlins bullpen, the weight that's been on their shoulders the past few days, the weight that was on their shoulders in Baltimore kind of finally caught up to them, and it was a tough night for the bullpen. The Marlins lose Game 2, 8-4. Now, let's go to today's game, Sunday afternoon's game. The Marlins took a 4-2 loss in this one. It was closer than you could say it was closer than the score. You could also say it was, the score doesn't give the Mets justice in terms of, how good they were at keeping the Marlins off the board. But let's talk about it. Pablo, I said we needed 6 innings from him. We needed a long start from him. He got 5, which was pretty good. He could have gotten 6. He only threw 80 pitches. But I haven't loved how quick Mattingly has been to pull starters, especially considering what's going on in the bullpen right now. But he gave Pablo the hook after 5. I kind of thought it was a quick decision from him. But anyway, let's look at the line for Pablo. He let up 5 hits, 3 runs. He walked 4, and he had 4 strikeouts. The changeup was really working for him. It was a really nice pitch. Probably should have had a couple more strikeouts. He was getting squeezed by the umpire. The umpiring in this game was really terrible on both sides. I mean, I'm not going to make the excuse and say the Marlins lost because of the umpiring, because they didn't. The Marlins had plenty of chances to win the game despite the umpiring. But I definitely think Pablo goes a little deeper into this game and has a little bit of a cleaner line, especially those 4 walks, if he's not getting squeezed so much. It was really just a poor effort from the umpire on both sides. But, like I said, that's not the reason the Marlins lost the game. You have to still win the game despite the umpire when the umpire's bad, and the Marlins were unable to do that. So pretty good from Pablo. Not what we saw in his first start, but pretty good all things considered. He held it together, and he got out of some tough jams without a ton of damage. Corey Dickerson dropped a fly ball in left field that should have been caught. That would have gotten the Marlins out of the inning with 1 run instead of 2 runs in the third. But it was the little things for the Marlins kind of caught up to them today, and I think that's one of the biggest reasons that they lost this game. Let's talk about some good things. So Aguilar had the bomb. They were down 3-0, and then Aguilar hit a 2-run bomb to get them back into it. You're thinking, okay, here we go. This is them fighting and scratching and doing everything they can, riding the wave as they've been doing. But it just kind of wasn't enough. They didn't get enough offense from the rest of the guys, because afterwards, Tarpley loaded the bases. Stephen Tarpley came in and loaded the bases, and then Mike Morin came in. He only let up 1, which was good. He held it together. He had 1 out, and the bases loaded, and he let up only a sac fly, but that got it to 4-2, and that just was too much for the Marlins. It was insurmountable today, because one of the main reasons is because they were really poor with runners in scoring position. They were 2 for 10 with runners in scoring position, and 2 of the guys that were the worst in those situations today are 2 of the guys that you're looking for a ton of offense. Hopefully, if you're the Marlins, and especially if you're Marlins fans right now, which is Monte Harrison and Jonathan Villar. Today, they were a combined 0 for 9 with 8 strikeouts. Both had the golden sombrero. They left 11 guys on base combined. That's really poor out of the 9-1 spots. You can't be getting that kind of production. You need those guys to drive in runs. Monte needs to do better. He needs to drive in runs with the bases loaded. He had bases loaded, I think, twice, and he came up empty both times. VR had a really tough series. We'll get to that in a second. But again, the little things kind of added up for the Marlins today. Bad situational hitting. Kind of going back to the old Marlins, the Marlins that can't hit with scoring runners in scoring position ever. The Marlins that, the bullpen kind of gets to them. But the bullpen, they only allowed 1 run today, but still, they needed to have Pablo's back a little more than they did, especially with the way the offense was producing. So it wasn't enough for the Marlins. They get the 2-run bomb from Aguilar, but again, the little things add up, and the Marlins lose, and they drop the last 2 games of the series. So let's take a look at the series as a whole. Let's start with the bad. Like I've been talking about for the past few days, the bullpen is taxed. The bullpen needs a rest. We've got Eliezer and Yams coming up in the next series. We'll get to that in a second. The bullpen's taxed. They need some. Thankfully, there's 2 days off this week that will be huge for the Marlins, because it'll get those guys a chance to kind of sit and reset. And that'll be huge for them, but the bullpen needs some help. And the reason the bullpen needs some help is because starters aren't going deep, and that's the next thing on the bad list, is that the starters need to pick up the bullpen. They need to start going deep. Mejia had 60-something pitches in the 3rd inning the other night. That can't be happening. Castano had a bunch of pitches, had 76 pitches through 4 1/3. That can't be happening. these guys have to start throwing cleaner innings. They've got to start working quicker innings, pitching more efficiently, attacking the strike zone more, because they're setting up the bullpen to be taxed, and the bullpen's doing a pretty good job. They're doing all they can, but eventually it's going to catch up to them when they're pitching, 4 or 5 innings every night. The Marlins starters have to do a better job of going deeper into games. The next bad thing, bad situational hitting. We just talked about it. 2 for 10 with runners in scoring position today. That's really not good. That's really, really bad. You can't be hitting 200 with runners in scoring position consistently and expect to win a bunch of ball games. Marlins need to do a better job hitting with runners in scoring position like they were doing in the Baltimore series, like they were doing in the Philly series, if they want to get more production out of this offense. VR's got to come up bigger. Monte's got to come up bigger. Dickerson has got to come up bigger. He was a little better in the last few games, in the last couple games, but he's got to come up bigger. He's got to drive in some runs. The lineup is light. You're not wanting to see Birdie. I'm looking at it now. Birdie, Joyce, Lavarnway, and Eddie Alvarez in the lineup every day. That's not the lineup that you want to see every day. But those guys have to come through. And the guys that really need to come through are the guys that are in the lineup every day, like VR, like Monte, like Dickerson. So, even Joyce, who's going to be in the lineup more often than a Lavarnway or an Eddie, but might not be in it every day. He's got to come through, and those guys had some really tough at bats in some big situations. And then VR and Monte. So let's talk about VR. He's a good player. He's going to go through up and downs. It happens. It's really frustrating when he goes through downs because we know what he can be when he's good. He had a really, really tough series. He had a lot of really bad at-bats the last couple of nights. He's got to be better if the Marlins want to get this offense going, especially because he's hitting in the leadoff spot. Let's talk about Monte. I've hyped Monte up as the next big thing. I still think he's going to be a really good major leaguer. I'm not going to overreact to 6 or 7 games, whatever he's played in now. But he's got to be better. His approach is really good. His approach is more than what I expected from him. He's working deep counts. He's working 3-ball counts. He's laying off, tough breaking pitches, laying off speed stuff. So that's really good. That's what you want to see from Monte. But he has to put the bat on the ball. He swung through a lot of good fastballs that were over the plate today from DeGrom, from Hughes, from Edwin Diaz. His strikeout against Edwin Diaz was 97, 98, 99 over the plate, and he just swung right through all of them. He's got to start putting the bat on the ball more, making more contact. He's still going to be a good player. I really like his approach, and I think results will come with approach, but results will also come with putting the ball in play, and he needs to do that more. There's some fine-tuning that needs to be done with Monte, but I still think he'll be a good player. I'm not panicking yet. I won't mind if they send him back to the alternate training site. I think it's a possibility. But also, you got to let him work out the kinks. And I think, if he makes some small adjustments with Rousing and starts putting the ball in play more, he'll be a good hitter. Let's talk about the good, because we haven't done a lot of that. Corey Dickerson, after hitting a little bit of a funk, had 3 hits the last 2 nights. That's definitely a good thing. You want to see him get going. Brian Anderson is still really good. He was 3 for 7 with a walk the last couple nights. A negative is that he had 4 strikeouts, so every time he got out, he struck out. But he's still really good. He made a nice defensive play today. He extend BA. Extend him. He's still hitting over 300 for the year so far, so good series for Brian Anderson. The really, really good Jesus Aguilar. He was definitely the MVP of the series if we had one. He had 6 hits in the series, 2 doubles, the home run today. And the big thing is, for a power hitter like that, he only struck out 1 time. That's really huge. He's putting the ball in play. Even if he's getting out, it's productive, and he's helping the team and keeping the line moving. So I love what I'm seeing from Aguilar so far. That established major league presence that the Marlins needed to get the offense rolling. He's been that guy so far, and it was a great series for him. The last thing that was really good is that, for all the negative things that we've talked about today, the Marlins still had a fighting spirit. They were still in this game right to the end. They loaded the bases towards the end of it. They gave themselves a chance. They gave themselves chances to win the game. The problem is they didn't take advantage of the chances to win the game. So that's definitely a positive, that they're in these games and that they're competing and that they're not letting these games get away from them. There were plenty of chances for the game to get away from the Marlins today, but they held on. They did a good job of not letting it get away from them. And so that's certainly something positive to take away amidst all the negatives. Now, we look forward after this Mets series. The Marlins have a day off tomorrow. I said that's a huge, huge. That's very big for the Marlins. They need that very badly. That's a huge thing for the bullpen especially. We go to Buffalo to face the Blue Jays. I know that sounds weird, but yes, we're sending up to Buffalo to face the Toronto Blue Jays up there. All those kids. We got Bichette's kid, we got Vlad's kid, and who else? Biggio's kid. And then we face a really good, he's not a kid, a kid in terms of being a son of a former Major League Baseball player, but he's a kid. We'll talk about him in a second. He's going to be pitching on Wednesday. So on Tuesday, the matchup is Eliezer Hernandez, who had a pretty good outing in Baltimore the other night. Marlins need him to eat up some innings. It would be nice to see him get into the fifth again against Hyunjin Ryu, the big free agent signing for the Blue Jays. He's their ace, so that's a lefty. We'll expect to see Monte and Brinson in the lineup. And then Wednesday is where we really get to see the firepower for the Blue Jays. Yamamoto will be on the mound for the Marlins. I'm excited to see him. Hopefully he'll bounce back from what was kind of a tough start the other night, and definitely want to see him go 5 or 6 innings. And then it's Nate Pearson on the bump for the Blue Jays. If you haven't heard about this kid, go check him out. He's going to throw gas. He's got good off-speed stuff. He's just one of these kids that's just coming up, and all these pitchers that are coming up now seem to be throwing gas with good off-speed stuff and good breaking stuff, and he's just the next one for the Blue Jays. He has ace potential for them. So it'll certainly be an interesting series for the Marlins. The Marlins need to get back rolling. They need to get some momentum back in the clubhouse. They need to start riding that wave again, getting it back up, and they head to Buffalo, not Toronto. They head to Buffalo on Tuesday night to start getting back in the swing of things.